Australians were told this Prime Minister and his government, and straight from his own lips, would be honest, open, fair and accountable. Well, for the last 3 years, we've seen anything but this in the way he's treated people and this parliament. We are a democracy, yet he treats us as a socialist, union-controlled government. The one time he gave Australians a real say about any issue, the voice of the parliament, they rejected him. They humiliated him. They showed him he was completely and utterly wrong, and he's never forgiven the Australian people for that. That's why his government is now, and his government, and straight from his own lips, would be honest, open, fair and accountable. Well, for the last 3 years, we've seen anything but this in the way he's treated people and this parliament. We are a democracy, yet he treats us as a socialist, union-controlled government. The one time he gave Australians a real say about any issue, the voice of the parliament, they rejected him. They humiliated him. They showed him he was completely and utterly wrong, and he's never forgiven the Australian people for that. That's why his government is now more secretive than ever. They're doing everything they can to avoid scrutiny and accountability, hiding their true plans and motives. The Prime Minister has sole discretion to choose how many advisers, One Nation and other crossbench senators are allocated. So what did the Prime Minister do? He radically cut the staffing of those senators who do not support the Labor Party, which party opposes the radical, unworkable policies of Labor more than any other. Of course, One Nation. When the Prime Minister cuts the staffing of those senators who take an opposing political view, he has an obvious conflict of interest. The incentive for the Prime Minister is to cut the resources of his political opponents in seeking to take political advantage and cut us off at the legs. Reducing the number of support staff for a senator effectively reduces the ability of a senator to function on behalf of the electorate and to provide an effective opposition, a foundation of our Westminster system of democratic government. Before continuing, here's some background. Each member of Parliament is allocated electorate officers to serve constituents. These are the same in number for all senators. Crossbench senators have until recently been allocated 2 parliamentary advisers, designated personal advisers. Their duty is to assist senators with researching proposed legislation, assist senators in writing speeches, advise on parliamentary tactics, be the first point of contact with community groups and deputise for senators in meetings when the senator is engaged in the chamber or elsewhere in the state. You may wonder why we need these extra staff. It's because we must do the same work as the major parties with far fewer resources, scrutinising legislation, liaising with effective stakeholders and getting the input of the Australian people, let alone trying to get our legislation drafted to put on the floor of Parliament, which that is another issue. On the 23rd of June 2025, Prime Minister Albanese notified me he would not allocate any additional staff to One Nation's 2 new senators, giving me the responsibility of allocating the same staff resources across twice as many senators. In doing this, he had exercised our discretion authorised under Section 4.1, 11.3 and 12 of the Members of Parliament Staff Act, MOPS. I now present his allocation of senators across the crossbench. Some crossbench senators, including Senator Roberts, were not allocated any personal staff. Senator Payman, who left the Labor Party in disgust, has had no personal staff allocated to her. Senator Lambie, though, who often supports Labor, has been granted 3 personal staff to assist her in the relatively small state of Tasmania. While she's not the only senator, remember, they've also got 12 senators, including Senator Lambie. The state I represent, Queensland, has around 10 times the number of constituents as Tasmania. One Nation secured Senate seats in New South Wales with more than 8.2 million people and Western Australia with more than 3 million people. But no personal staff. Now remember, Tasmania, 500,000 people with 3 extra personal staff, and yet we don't get anything for Western Australia or New South Wales. Yet these officers were allocated no staff at all.
Australians were promised that Anthony Albanese and his government would be honest, transparent, and fully accountable, but what unfolded in Parliament tells a very different story. Today, Pauline Hanson didn't just speak, she exposed a deeper political pattern that raises serious questions about how power is being used. Let's break it down simply. Senators who challenge the Labor government are seeing their staff reduced. But senators who align with Labor are either unaffected or even rewarded. That's not accountability, that's selective control. And here's the bigger issue. In any democracy, opposition is meant to act as a check on power. But if you reduce their staff, limit their research capacity, and weaken their ability to function effectively, you don't just weaken individuals, you weaken the entire system of accountability. This is no longer just about staff allocation. It becomes a question of political fairness. And the numbers make it even more controversial. Representatives from highly populated states receive fewer resources, while smaller regions receive more support. So the question arises, is this equal representation, or political preference disguised as administration? Then comes the most concerning part. Some senators reportedly only learned about staffing changes through the media, not through formal communication. That raises a serious transparency issue. Decisions affecting parliamentary function should never come as news headlines. Throughout the debate, Pauline Hanson highlighted what she called a clear pattern, and whether one agrees or not. The concern is about consistency and fairness in decision-making. Because when resource allocation starts aligning with political loyalty, the system stops looking neutral. And once that happens, the foundation of democratic balance starts to weaken. At that point, it's no longer just a policy disagreement. It becomes a structural question about how power is distributed and controlled. And that's the real concern here. Because if opposition voices can be weakened not through debate, but through administrative decisions, then accountability doesn't disappear, it simply becomes optional. Now the real question is this still a balanced democratic system? Or is it slowly shifting into something else? Is this still a balanced democratic system? Or is it slowly shifting into something else? Because when funding, staffing, and oversight start depending on political alignment, the line between governance and control becomes dangerously thin. At that point, the real debate is not about individuals, it's about the system itself. What do you think is happening here? And once trust breaks at that level, restoring it becomes the hardest task in politics.